Okay, let's look at one other thing that the value of a will determine for the graph of your parabola. When the absolute value of a is greater than 1, let's review what absolute value means. The absolute value of a number is just how far that number is from 0. So if a, the absolute value of a is greater than 1, the parabola becomes more narrow. Okay, so the graph that you were given begins with the parent function, y equals x squared. And then we have graphed y equals 3x squared. The value for a in this function is 3. 3 is greater than 1, so the graph becomes more narrow. Now let me give you some more examples of quadratic functions that would be more narrow than the parent function. Y equals 5x squared, because the value for a is 5, and 5 is greater than 1. Y equals negative 6x squared, and negative 6 is 6 units away from 0. So the absolute value of negative 6 is 6, and 6 is greater than 1. Therefore, it would be more narrow. Y equals 9x squared. The value for a is 9. 9 is greater than 1, so it's more narrow. And y equals negative 4x squared. And the absolute value of negative 4 is 4, which is greater than 1, so it would be more narrow. So if an absolute value of a is greater than 1, the parabola becomes more narrow. Let's look what happens when the absolute value of a is less than 1. The parabola becomes wider. The graph shows you the parent function, y equals x squared, and then they have graphed y equals 1/3 x squared. The value for a is 1/3, and 1/3 is less than 1, so your graph becomes wider. Some more examples of quadratic functions whose graph would be wider than the parent function are y equals 1/8 x squared, because 1/8 is less than 1. Y equals negative 1/5 x squared, because again, we're looking at how far a is from 0, and 1/5 is closer to 0 than 1. 1/5 is less than 1. That graph would be wider. Y equals 0.62 x squared, because 0.62 is less than 1. And finally, y equals negative 0.45 x squared. All 4 of these functions we have written would create the graph of a parabola that is wider than the parent function y equals x squared.